Today's notes are on the history of life on Earth, which is basically talking about Earth's geologic timeline and the history of life, like how life has evolved over time here on our planet. So a lot of today's notes are going to be review because a lot of this is information that we've covered in Unit 5. So how do we learn about ancient life? Well, first of all, most of what we know about ancient life comes from clues that we've gotten from the past, a lot of which comes from fossils. The scientists that study fossils are called paleontologists. And as they discover new fossils, they compile all that information into one big record called the fossil record. And all of that information gets compiled and shared all across the world. And putting all that information together can provide clues about what life was like and what Earth was like in the past. So like I said, the fossil record is just the name that we give to that record of all of the fossils that have ever been discovered all around the world. And what we can learn from that fossil record is how life forms have changed over time. We also can learn about how Earth has changed over time, but in this unit, we're really more focused on life form specifically. So here on the right side, I have a screenshot from your book that just shows how limb shape and limb structure has changed over time as organisms went from swimming in the ocean to being able to swim in the ocean and then visit land every so often, like we see in that middle organism, to walking on land. Fossils in the fossil record can also show us when we have mass extinctions. And when mass extinctions happen, what we'll see is just major numbers of animals and plants just going extinct and disappearing out of the fossil record all at one time. Mass extinctions can be caused by a couple of different things. They can be caused by a gradual environmental change, or they can be caused by a major catastrophic change like we see here in that artist's depiction of the Cretaceous extinction. So as we talk about Earth's history, we'll often talk about the geologic timescale. The geologic timescale is just that timeline that we use to organize Earth's super, super long history. Remember that Earth has a 4.6 billion year history, so we have to be able to organize it and talk about it in a little bit easier way. So the way we do that is we divide Earth's history into eons, eras, periods, and epochs. But remember that they're not divided evenly. They're divided by major changes in Earth's structure and in what was living here. Sometimes those major changes might be mass extinctions. So first we start with Precambrian time. Precambrian time is what we refer to as just anything that happened before our current eon. Precambrian time consists of 3 previous eons, the Hadean, Archean, and Proterozoic. This timeline calls the Hadean the Priscoan. It's the same thing. It just has 2 different names. But then in our current eon, which is the Phanerozoic eon, we have 3 eras. The Phanerozoic eon is split into Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic. And you can see that the Cenozoic, that little yellow one here, is the shortest era so far, and that's the one that we're currently in. So basically, we're going to go through this section by section, and we'll start by talking about Precambrian time. So what was Precambrian time like? Precambrian time is, like I said, the name that we give to all of Earth's time before our current eon. So it's a really, really, really long span of time. It's 4.6 billion years ago to 542 million years ago. That's a really, really long time. During most of Precambrian, most life was microscopic. We do not have a lot of fossils from Precambrian time because most of our life forms from this time hadn't figured out how to make those exoskeletons or bones or any of those parts that are easily fossilized. So we don't really have a whole lot of fossils, but what we do leads us to believe that most life was either microscopic or eventually just became just ocean-dwelling life. Eventually, during this Precambrian time, these little cyanobacteria used the sunlight to create food and breathed out oxygen. This is very similar to how modern plants um, operate. But this cyanobacteria helped create the atmosphere that we have today. Well, when that happened, the environment changed, the atmosphere changed, and some of the other organisms that lived here at that time weren't able to survive with our new oxygenated atmosphere. So that caused a mass extinction. Um, Also, during this time, we had some multicellular organisms start to come into the scene here. Those simple early prokaryotes, which is just like a single celled organism that doesn't have a nucleus, kind of like bacteria. Those simple prokaryotes, some of them evolved into eukaryotes, which is just like a more complex single celled organism that has those organelles and has that nucleus. And eventually, those eukaryotes evolved into some multicellular organisms. This is an artist rendering of what Precambrian life might have looked like. It's all life completely in the oceans. You'll see some different plants, some different animals, but remember, there aren't a lot of bones in Precambrian life. So that's why we don't really have a lot of fossils from this time period. We do have some fossils, just not a lot. The next time period we're going to talk about here, we're now in our current eon. So we're now going to be talking about the Paleozoic era. Paleozoic just means ancient life. Paleo means ancient and zoic means life. So this was named when we thought that Paleozoic life was our very, very oldest life. Now that we have more information from the fossil record, we know that there were more simple life forms in the Precambrian time period. But during Paleozoic time, life moved onto land. So from all of that ocean-dwelling stuff onto land. So life as we know it started by floating around in the oceans, but then eventually those organisms, the plant, the fungi, the air-breathing animals, insects, they eventually evolved to take over those continents that have been existing there. At the end of the Paleozoic era, we had the biggest mass extinction that's been recorded in Earth's history, called the Permian mass extinction. 96% of ocean species went extinct at this point. This is just an artist rendering of what Paleozoic ocean life might have looked like. So you can see here on the right-hand side, this big, long, cone-shaped organism here that is called a cephalopod. That is an old ancestor of the modern-day squid. We have some cool plant life, animal life, all living in the oceans here. You'll see some things that have shells and bones. So we have a lot more organisms that were able to become fossilized. So we have a lot more information about Paleozoic life. The next time period we're going to talk about is Mesozoic. This is the age of the dinosaurs. Mesozoic means middle life. Meso means middle, and zoic means life. This, like I said, is commonly known as the age of the reptiles or the age of the dinosaurs. So those big dinosaurs and other reptiles dominated Earth. This is also when we started to see our first birds and some smaller mammals, like little rodent-style mammals. Conifer forests. Conifer trees are like trees that can make pine cones, and plants that can create flowers. This is important because now that these plants have flowers, they're able to cross-pollinate and they're able to trade those genes and get a lot more genetic variety, which makes them a little bit better able to adapt if there's environmental changes. At the end of the Mesozoic, we have that famous mass extinction where we had the asteroid strike off the coast of Mexico. The asteroid struck, that caused lots of debris and dust and everything to go back up into the air, blocking out the sun. We also had a lot of forest fires and all kinds of stuff that was creating large amounts of smoke, which would block out the sun. If the sun gets blocked out, then plants can't live. And if there's no plants, then there's no herbivores. And then if there's no herbivores, then there's no secondary consumers. So at the end of the Mesozoic era, this is called the Cretaceous extinction, 2/3 of all land species went extinct. That was huge. This is just an artist rendering of what Mesozoic life might have looked like. You see like huge thick forests, and a lot of these plants, a lot of these trees look like they could have been conifers, meaning like cone-bearing plants. Lots of ferns. The last time period we're going to talk about here is this very last one, the Cenozoic era. Cenozoic era is our current era. So Cenozoic means recent life. Ceno means recent, and zoic means life. This is where we see birds start to really flourish. Mammals are huge here. Mammals really evolve into the variety of mammal species that we have here today. And then we get lots and lots more flowering plants that really dominate Earth. Without those dinosaur predators, because a lot of those dinosaurs went extinct at the Cretaceous extinction, those tiny little rodent mammals really, really flourished, and they did really well. And because those little mammals flourished, they were able to evolve and adapt into all of the different mammal species that we have here today. So lots of climate changes happened during this time. Mammals then started to evolve to withstand colder temperatures at the poles, and a lot of them moved towards the equator where it was warmer. And then this is important to us. We had all of the different species of primates evolve during this time. That includes us, humans. Humans, apes, monkeys, and all of the ancestors of all of those groups evolved during the Cenozoic era. So this is an artist rendering of Cenozoic life, clearly closer to one of the poles because it was colder here. These are woolly mammoths, and then you see some saber-toothed cats down here. But also, it's just important to remember that early hominids and human ancestors, they also came around during Cenozoic life. Also, the building of the Great Pyramids, this is also Cenozoic. George Washington, also Cenozoic. And remember that we are still in the Cenozoic era. So there's still history being written today.